All right, 1 second, boys.
Hey, Hockey World. We'll wait for Jan. Hold on. Just everyone stay around. Hi, Jan. Okay. Now the rest with something to say.
Well, Major League Baseball is back, and I'll say in quotations, it's back. It's not going to be the game that we all knew. It's going to be a bastardized, different kind of version. But, and I wouldn't say that about all the sports coming back, but the changes that have been made in this sport are pretty drastic. And one of the worst things, I wrote about it on Sportsology, people could check it out, but one of the worst things is starters are going to get like 12 starts, right? So the Cy Young Award is likely going to go to a reliever, which it almost never does. And that will be the perfect ending of a season like this because it's going to be a disaster. It's just, there's going to be so many things that are going on. The other thing, with the pitchers having a damp cloth in their back pocket, it's going to be pretty easy to put stuff on that too if they wanted to and put it on the ball. So we'll see how this all shakes out.
They're going to be constantly replacing balls because every time a pitcher rubs it with his hands or touches the bill of his cap or something like that, they're going to be afraid that there's going to be
new bulk. It'll be the new bulk.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can I just say something here? You baseball people make me sick. Just absolutely sick. We're getting a sport back. It's the year of the virus. We're doing our best. If a guy's got to have something in his back pocket, just deal with it. God, you're getting your sport. You're getting to watch games.
Wait a second. The change,
Mr. Hipster.
Yeah. The changes made.
Just because I have hair, I don't have to. Just because I have hair doesn't mean
I'm proud of what I don't have. I don't care.
It's sort of 50-50. Anthony's got hair, Eklund's got hair. I've got half a head, and then we got the two baldies.
I've got hair that if I don't shower, I have to wear a hat.
Well,
when I don't wear a hat, I'm not trying. I'll just give you that.
What do you feel about a sport that now that they've come back have not mentioned or done anything for the fans the entire way? Matter of fact, season ticket holders only got half a refund, and single ticket holders have only gotten half a refund if they asked for it, and that's because the rest of the season hasn't been technically postponed yet in Ticketmaster and on their websites.
You go at them as much as you want. I get that completely, but as far as
there's a lot of stuff.
As far as the game itself that's going to be played on the field, there's going to be some changes. There's still going to be 3 outs in an inning. There's still going to be 4 balls to a walk.
Well, there are significant changes here. Putting a runner on second base in extra innings. They're making changes to the end of games that are about as drastic as having a shootout settled hockey. And that
was what I was thinking with regards to the runner on second in extra innings. That was like, wow, this is baseball shootout now.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
I get that. That's definitely, but there's some of the stuff you guys are talking about.
Well, there's other things that we haven't talked about and I haven't even written about, but as an example, for service time, they've figured out, there's a couple players, all they need to do is play one game and they get not paid, but they get their service time for the entire year. There's no more incentive for that guy to play the rest of this weird season if he doesn't want to. And there's a lot of players like that.
Oh yeah, no, I get that. That's a legitimate thing, but
it is about money. This season is not about the fans; it is about money.
Well, that's not a surprise. Really, what season was about the fans and not about money?
With this one, it's been very spelled out and plainly spelled out that we're only coming back for the money. At least in other seasons, there were players that you knew that enjoyed playing in front of fans and would be fan friendly and all that. Once the virus hit, it became just about money. At least not all the other leagues are talking about money. The NBA really doesn't even talk about money, and the NHL really doesn't talk about money.
No, and I agree with all that.
It does.
The NHL's been, I think in the NHL, it's a case of, that they worked out their dysfunctional family years ago. It feels like, the MLB is just starting to get to it now, but the NHL, don't think the NHL is not, saints in this thing. We missed an entire season. Let's not forget about that.
But baseball, as Russ said, I think the bigger key is clearly the postseason, right? Everything regular season is solely to get you to have a postseason, which is where the majority of the money is going to be made. And look, I don't think any of us are surprised by this. Look, and especially with all the consternation and the arguing and where they landed, there is no rational reason this could not have been decided a couple of weeks ago, and they could have been playing baseball in July and had basically July all to themselves with no other sports. Now they're going to have to compete with hockey, regardless of how people view hockey, and especially the NBA when the NBA comes back, and NFL training camps are going to be opening as far as we expect. So their window of opportunity to be the only game in town has really ended.
Another note from a different sport. The Avery Bradley of the LA Lakers, I believe he was the first one who said, unless you count
Trevor Ariza from the Portland Trailblazers.
Yeah, who's the star player from Portland?
Well,
Damian Lillard.
Lillard said he wasn't going to play. Lillard said he's not playing no matter what. But Bradley, for a top-tier team like the Lakers, is saying he's not playing because I don't know if he has a secondary, some sort of pre-existing condition.
I think it may involve his children. Something that involves his children.
Yeah, but Russ, the guy who's apparently going to replace him is J.R. Smith. So there's not going to be a drop-off at all, is there?
Well, J.R. Smith, I don't think played last year though.
No, I think the last thing
there's a drop-off. You know why Trevor Ariza is not playing? Because he's banked like $30 million, considering the Knicks gave him most of it. He's not a good player. So there's no incentive for him to play.
He's a solid player in the NBA. He's a good He's a good 3-and-D player.
And now Nikola Jokic announced that he's gotten COVID also. So
okay, let's talk about
with the Knicks, and that's what bothers you.
No, I don't care about the Knicks anymore. Let's talk about Jokic because that's an interesting one because that entire country has totally discounted this disease right from the get-go. Remember, they were still playing hockey with when nobody else was playing hockey. So he has the tournament. He has fans there. There's no social distancing. Now, it wasn't tons of fans, but they were close by.
They go out dancing in a club.
He goes to a club, and then, of course, he ends up with this and now probably can't play in the U.S. Open, which, again, was banking on players like him.
Well, he wasn't. He already said he wasn't going to play unless he could bring his entourage with him.
Right, we discussed that the other day.
The COVID All-Star.
He's an interesting. Novak's a real interesting character.
Yeah, I mean,
and he's an anti-vaxxer.
I mean, I don't go anywhere without my entourage, as you folks know. You've seen
right.
Me.
But by the way,
and he's an anti-vaxxer too, because he was like, "Well, I don't know if I need this vaccine when it happens."
By the way, Ak, in the chat, they're saying that with the hat that you're wearing, that you resemble Corey Feldman in the movie Dream a Little Dream.
What movie are we talking about?
Dream a Little Dream.
Well, wasn't his co-star Heather Graham in that one?
I've got the Corey Feldman thing before. I've got.
I think you just need white gloves.
I have gotten that before. I used to get
isotoners.
I can. It depends on what I wear, but I have the ability to let like a John Lennon thing look to me too if I want to. I've got that going on. And I could also. I've also used to get
more Julian, not John, but it's close.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I mean, I've got the Lennon nose apparently.
Yes.
Like,
well, better than Vladimir Ilyich.
Yeah, I also used to get Patrick Swayze all the time when I was younger, which is funny because it's like I sat next to Patrick Swayze the other day.
Getting it now, yeah.
In Atlantic City, I'm not getting it now.
Nice, well done.
Older.
There's still ghosts.
There you go. Very nice.
It's Phil Collins.
I like that. That's cool. Mike, where's your hat?
Where's your Mike? You're left.
You don't want not wearing a hat, Mike. We need a hat day.
Anthony was at the top of the closet or the bottom of the closet?
Every Wednesday is hat day here.
At the top.
Yeah. All right. I like it.
It's just when he goes golfing.
Oh yeah.
That's like you look like a guy who's going to go up to me and say, hey, stop mowing your lawn on Sundays.
Right.
Take my stick at you.
That's what it feels like you're going to say to me.
Yeah, get off my lawn, lad. Get off.
He looks like he's one of Peaky Blinders.
Every Sunday you mow your lawn at the same time.
Exactly.
Who knows what's in that hat?
27 championships.
I like it a lot. All right, let's get going. Shall we begin? All right, here we go. It's the 24th, I think.
Yeah, why not? Sounds right.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It is Wednesday, June 24th, 2020.
I'm Michael Lagello, and 4 years ago today, in this very town, the Toronto Maple Leafs drafted Austin Matthews first overall.
Oh, man.
I'm Jan Levine, and thanks for the history lesson there, Mike.
I'm Anthony Mingione from Center Ice Philly Magazine.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast comes every Monday through Friday. This time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And you know what else happened hockey-wise? Another famous thing that happened on this date is the Chicago Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup, defeating the Boston Bruins in the final 17 seconds in Boston.
Dave Boland.
Yep, crazy thing. Were you at that one, Russ?
In Boston, yes.
2013.
When the Hawks won the Stanley Cup? When we all thought
I believe I was there.
It was like the last 17 seconds. We all thought I mean, this is the typical like blogger moment, like hockey blogger moment when you've got your flight figured out on Southwest.
Yeah.
You're sitting there waiting to hit okay, bye, because you don't want to miss it because you got to fly back to Chicago.
Well,
17 seconds left. Your plans changed drastically.
It must have been something about that building act, because I've been told by many a Toronto media member that when it was 4-1 in that famous Game 7, the Leafs against the Bruins, that all the Toronto media were booking their flights to New York City because they were going to play the Rangers in the second round, and obviously.
That's something you have to do because like we're all fans.
Yeah, it's a necessary thing. It's not out of arrogance.
You're sitting there, and there's a lot of people. There's a whole machine that's going to go from one city to the other.
I had someone in Chicago, so that wasn't a problem for me.
Yeah. You had to get, So I was ready to go. We were all ready to go, and then suddenly, before you know it, that Fleet Center went. I think it was the Fleet Center at that point, or whatever. TD Bank.
It was the Fleet Center then.
No, completely quiet. Within a matter of seconds, it was just nuts. How the Bruins won 2 of their Stanley Cups there, the way they won against the Flyers, the way they won that one, just bizarre ways to win.
Well, we will talk about the Bruins.
We're gonna get in the Bruins, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but can we start with some relatively breaking news? Elliot Friedman reported about 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
That now the assumption was, and I know that you reported on the weekend that there was talk of Vancouver's place in terms of being one of the 2 hub cities rising to the point that it was reported yesterday that
hotel
rooms were being booked.
Yeah.
Apparently their bid has hit a snag, and now they're not so sure that it's going to be Vancouver. And I made an observation to the guys before we started that it's ironic that, and maybe not connected at all, but it's ironic that all of a sudden Vancouver has hit a snag as soon as Toronto made a renewed bid yesterday that included basically access to the entire C&E complex, the Raptors practice facility, a 400-room hotel on the waterfront, the Coca-Cola Coliseum for practice. I mean, this whole elaborate a situation.
Everything but Tim Hortons donuts.
Yeah. Well, what are they? They'll throw those in, Russ. I mean,
yeah. I'm sure they will.
But I mean, they may not be connected at all, but they might be connected.
The one thing, we've all stayed in Vancouver. The hotels are not close by the rink.
No, they're not really. They're not. The rink is in its own little area a little bit.
That could be a deal breaker when you have the other cities where they're closer by.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, it's funny that Chicago took such a big leap forward yesterday too. And I wrote about that.
I'm still puzzled by that one. I'll be honest.
And it is kind of puzzling because there was one thing about Chicago, like you had talked about before, like the getting around thing and traffic to get from place to place. Chicago is the worst.
It is. It's the worst of all the cities we've talked about.
And nothing comes close to trying.
Well, I don't know. Boston can be pretty bad.
Boston can be bad, but with Boston, you can take a subway there. Like you can get on, you can get a train to take but if you want to get from we spent hours in going from the Chicago hotel to the United Center. Just like ridiculous amounts of time. I spent like 90 minutes once with Austin met with Connor McDavid and Eichel right behind me in Chicago as we drove on the bus from it's just that place that is the traffic in Chicago.
And there's another one where the hotels aren't right there.
They're not. There's nothing around that arena. So there's
maybe they're around the new practice arena. Did that open yet, Ek?
Must be something like that. There was.
What?
It must be
I
something.
thought someone had an answer on that. Okay.
I don't know, but
I know they're building a new practice facility there.
Yeah, they are. The NHL, I talked with the NHL, said, yeah, Chicago made a really good pitch, and they liked it a lot. Edmonton's pitch.
You know what it is? They gave them that caramel cheese popcorn. That's what they did.
Oh, my God. That stuff was friggin' great.
It doesn't matter what they say after that.
The most overrated thing in the world, in my opinion, which is deep dish pizza, which is just
bologna. Oh my God.
Horrendous. I think
it's horrendous. Come on, Ed.
The thing is with deep dishes, the fact I had it finally when we were in Chicago. And to me, it's not pizza. It's its own sort of thing.
It's a tomato pie, is what it is.
It's fake lasagna. I'll call it fake lasagna, deep dish pizza.
It's closer. Actually, in many ways, it is a little closer to lasagna.
It's
closer to lasagna than pizza. You know, it's like lasagna. It's like lasagna with bread instead of.
You didn't even try to accept it. That's the problem, Mick.
Me, I've been to the best place. I've been taking.
I mean, it's an inch thick of mozzarella with sauce on top with toppings.
Right. How bad could that be?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to get congested.
Lasagna. I mean, isn't that what lasagna is? I mean, that's what lasagna is. Come on.
No, lasagna has noodles. There's no noodles on this.
That has just alienated the entire Chicago bandwidth of this.
So much of the traffic from the Windy City.
Believe me, it's not the pizza.
Well, trust me, when we start talking about Boston, it's going to be like, you know what? Chowder's overrated.
No, it isn't. No.
I'm gonna have to take your word if it's good or it's not, boys.
Wait till we get the cheesesteaks.
Same thing. I'm taking your word on that one too, guys.
Yeah, I know. Cheesesteaks. No. Anyway, but no, we got off track. It's not the deep dish pizza that Chicago got it for. That's for sure. It's
Flamester in the chat is asking if there's been any update on whether the West teams will play. Like if there's one Eastern.
They haven't said anything about that.
Yeah, they haven't said anything, but I know that there was contradictory reports. First, they said the East teams would go West and West East.
Yeah.
I mean, if they want to avoid any kind of minute advantage, home ice, then they would do that. But maybe they believe the costs would be. Yeah,
they think it's ridiculous. I talked to people about that, and I wrote a story about that over the weekend, I guess it was. And yeah, there's this. They're not. That's not what they want to do. They want to have the East team from the East, the West team from the West.
Now, one other note regarding we mentioned yesterday that the league would be moving to what I called phase 2.5, meaning an increase of the size of the number of players in each group from 6 to 12. The Tampa Bay Lightning have reopened their facilities today, in spite of the fact that COVID-19 is spiking in Florida, but they're operating under, I guess, more stringent.
Teams like this should just get out of town. I mean, like Arizona should get out of Arizona.
Absolutely. I mean, again, I don't know why. Just go north for a couple weeks. Go to Buffalo or someplace like that.
Yeah, just find another. Go to Canada or something.
Right, find another place for a couple weeks. I mean,
today you guys saw that the governor of like New York and New Jersey and Connecticut put out this thing. That now if you go to travel here from a state where there is a problem.
New York has become Canada, basically.
There's a 14-day quarantine now, which makes sense. I mean, so it's like that.
And that's something that's probably not going to be very negotiable for sports teams.
I mean, it's not going to be, and we could see that, in places like Vegas, too. I mean, in one,
actually, Russ Cuomo did say in the press conference that like situations like the Yankees, it sounds like there's going to be a waiver for.
Well, the Yankees, they may not stay there. That's why they'll play there. And then they might go stay in Westchester or something.
Well, they said they're holding spring training at Yankee Stadium.
No, I know that, but it doesn't mean they're staying in New York City. They're not going to stay in New York City.
I think they're staying at their own individual.
They might stay at their own houses.
Isn't there already a spring training? I mean, didn't they already have spring training?
They did, and now this is like spring training 2.0.
Yeah, they have to ramp up their physical activity, just like the
because baseball, it's a grueling sport to play in. You have to
stop.
Those guys, if they're not in shape, I mean,
you're fighting an uphill battle. You're never going to win on this call.
If you're not in shape. I mean, standing in the middle of the field for 3 hours is not. I mean, I've tried to do it out of shape, and it's hard. I mean,
right? Because flopping around a net's a lot harder. I got you.
It is way harder. Yeah, for sure. No question about it.
Right.
You get definitely
center field and standing in the middle of the field. Anyway,
you know what? I played in a 100-degree game last summer. You play in 100 degrees for 7 innings, moving around, running the bases, playing the field. You tell me how you feel compared to playing on the ice and just having to stop a few pucks.
Sure. I'll do that anytime, any day of the week. Any day of the week. I played baseball my whole life. I was a baseball player. I was a little league all-star, man. I played baseball my whole life.
When's the last time you ran?
I run every day. Right? I've gotten in great shape. Don't call me out, man. I'm in my best shape I've been in 10 years right now.
We talked about the Hall of Fame yesterday, and we
Yeah.
had a chance here to
You're over there
Bring my Hall of
sipping out of a burger cup over there, Russ. What are you doing?
Fame.
Every day it's a cup from another place.
I play pickleball every day. Okay. But as Mike was saying, I want to bring in my 2 cents on the Hall of Fame for a second too, because I know you guys talked about it.
Yep.
The announcement was coming up probably any minute, right? I forget when they.
4:30.
4:30. Okay, 4:30. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I threw a couple names out there that I still just are baffling to me, and one of them is Mike Richter. That I just think that it's just like every time the Hall of Fame comes around, and Mike Richter's not in there. And I know, like, I looked on Mike Richter's Wikipedia page, and there, right at the top, says Mike Richter's number 3 in the all-time Rangers greats. And how many people in the all-time Ranger greats, Russ, that are in the top 10 are not in the Hall of Fame?
It's true. He's probably the only one. No, there may be 2. There may be 2, but the idea is, heck, 7 goalies only 7 have gotten in since 1989.
Yeah, I mean that's fine, but he's one of them who should be. I mean, like, literally the guy.
Well, once you name him, we named them all. There's another 10 goalies that should be in.
Yeah, we went through all of them. Barrasso yesterday. We went through Vernon. We went through Cujo. We went through Osgood.
I just think that, I mean, I think Richter, guys, I grew up hating the Rangers, and Great Gloria is right around the corner. Grew up right around the corner for me, but I have like a really tough time imagining that he literally won a Stanley Cup for the Rangers. If not for Richter, we're still chanting 1940. And he not only wins the Rangers the Stanley Cup, but he wins the World Cup for the Team USA. He won both those tournaments. I mean, and when you say he won them, he literally was the one who won them, to me. And that's like,
I'm not going to argue, but again, the history of goaltending in the Hockey Hall of Fame is horrible.
Well, two names that we didn't mention, because we talked to Ginla, we talked Ilyash, Alfredson, McGillney. Yeah. Shane Doan was not mentioned, and honestly, I don't.
For good reason.
Yeah, I don't get the feeling he's a legitimate candidate.
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing about Doan. Okay, I mean, it depends how you look at it, obviously, but Doan is the best Phoenix Coyote player of all time.
That doesn't matter.
He's the best of his team. He also was a real huge staple on a lot of Team Canada teams, right? Like, he was a big player. He was a big player. He's not a point getter like a lot of the guys necessarily, but he's a huge two-way player, a huge leader. I mean, without him, you wonder if the Coyotes are still in that state right now. I mean, he literally was one of the only guys they had, one of the only things they had going early on. He is just, and I mean, I know he's not going to get like, huge support. He's not like one of those guys, but he is. When you're the best player ever for your team that you played for, I think that like I see Alfredson as the same, actually. Like, I see Alfredson as the best.
No, I get that. We talked about Alfredson, and I said I would put Elias in now, but Elias also has more points in like 8 less seasons than Doan. Like, it's
he's not a point getter, but Doan was way more than a point getter.
But he didn't win anything either.
He did with Team Canada.
He won the Messier Award. He won the King Clancy.
If that's the case, then Ryan Smith should be in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Yeah. No. I mean, no. But I think he was more influential than Ryan Smith was.
I think Shane Doan will be watching the awards like the same way we will. The other
thing. I mean, I don't know if you guys talked about builders, and I mean the feeling.
No, we didn't talk about builders.
The feeling seems to be that when I talk to people or listen to people out there, that Brian Murray is going to get in. And I don't have a real problem with Brian Murray getting in as a builder, but I still don't understand Brian Burke not being in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And I mean, to me, Brian Burke has done so much for such a long time in so many different levels of hockey.
He's pissed off people that are on the panel. That's
right. But I actually think that his being in the media now may help eventually get him in. Whereas the other name that I thought you were going to mention, and it would be very controversial based on what happened with him this year, and I think honestly that he probably will not get in until after he passes away, is Don Cherry. Don Cherry would have been a shoo-in eventually, but with everything in terms of him getting let go by the CBC, I don't think I think it's going to be posthumous. They're not going to let him in until after.
I mean, ahead of him though, Mike is McLean. I mean, like it's like his I mean his
partner. I would put McLean in now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, partner, I mean, that there's a guy. Whatever.
I mean, McLean's not a play-by-play guy, so do they qualify for that particular award? You know, that like
no, he's not. He doesn't play. But as far as builders go, it's impossible to say McLean's not a builder of hockey. I mean, if those, I mean, we're all in the United States, but like those of us who can watch Canadian television legally know that McLean does a lot of stuff.
You can make a case. You can make a case for Dave Hodge, who was a
but I mean,
I would put McLean in before Hodge.
There's this thing called that the hockey day. I forget what it's called exactly, where they have they go to a different town each year.
Yeah.
And the CBC does this with Ron McLean, and that's, I mean, it's literally building he's a hockey builder to the upteenth degree.
Sure.
I mean, I don't get.
He's a hockey ombudsman, is what he is, and
he's not in the Hall of Fame is absurd to me. That's but I really, really think that he should.
Alan Eagleson will never get in.
No, he's not getting in, and I know who's going to win the Elmer Ferguson, but I can't say. So at 5:00, I'll be happily tweeting for one of the writers that's very deserving.
Well, I'm just checking. I thought Alan Eagleson might have been in and kicked out.
That's possible, but I don't think he ever got in.
He was removed.
Okay.
And he resigned from the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's a nice honor to be able to say. I got to the Hall of Fame and then I left.
Well, I mean, the thing that we talked about, which is the most maddening about the Hockey Hall of Fame, is their lack of transparency for voting, and we have no idea what the criteria is other than a bunch of ex-players, ex-GMs, whoever they decide to have on their panel, just throw around names and talk about it.
I wrote it in my blog today. The same thing. I mean, that's
we're kind of doing that. We've been kind of doing that.
I know, but we've
applied some criteria. We've tried to put some.
We just don't know what their criteria is.
Right, league awards, status in the league, whether or not he was considered an elite player in his era, Olympic gold medals, Canada Cups, World Cups, and all that may be part of it. But here's a hint: then just come out and say, "Hey guys, this is part of what we use as our evaluation process." Even though part of it is subjective.
I've known people who are on the committee, like Eric Johashik was on the committee. I've talked to him about it, and he said it is an interesting situation. It is an interesting setup. It's like everybody on the committee comes with their guys for that year, and then they pitch it to everybody else. Basically, is how it works.
Well,
and the NFL works very similar.
I was in contact with somebody who works at the Hall of Fame, asking about, because I wrote a column about 5 players who are former Leafs that could be candidates, and one was Lauren Shabbat, who played in the 30s, and there is no veterans committee in the series.
No.
So basically, if somebody doesn't bring up Lauren Shabbat, he's not getting in. Right. And obviously, since he played in the 20s and 30s, nobody who's alive who saw him is around anymore, and there's very little archival video.
Well, it's interesting for the Elmer Ferguson, for the writing award. It's not like writers get to nominate who should go in, or the Hockey Writers Association or anything like that. They literally either talk to Eric or there's one other writer, and that is the committee to decide who's going to get in. And that's, to me, it's like, no offense to Eric and the other writer, but it's like it needs to be broader than that.
I mean, Stan Fischler wasn't even around when Lauren Shabbat was playing for the Rangers, so it's
well, again, there should be a veterans committee. We said about the either builders getting in separately as opposed to being part of the overall population, and then international should be a separate category also, where those players are not viewed in the I can only have X number, making it from the overall total. Each one of those should be separate, not part of the overall total that gets in from the main hall.
Well, I think the problem with that is the Hall of Fame itself is terrified of being just the NHL Hall of Fame, and they run out of the way to not, like, they're afraid of that for whatever reason. I don't know. It's just like there's long running stuff. It goes back to the WHA. It goes back all kinds of stuff that they.
I think they're the one sport that has a right to be, because, like, with baseball, it is the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. I mean, you might get in from the Japanese league if you never played there, but it's a real rarity.
NFL, same boat. Basketball
is a little bit.
Basketball and hockey, I think, are the two sports that can really sort of make a separation of the sport because of how international basketball has become.
There are very much international careers and professional careers that all these hockey players have. They're totally separate. They look at them.
I mean, Russ Sadahara is not in the baseball.
I know, which is crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's I mean, hockey is more along the lines of soccer, right? Like where that there's lots of leagues throughout the world, and
Right.
and the NHL is the best league, and you could say the English league is the best league in soccer, whatever you want to say, but there's all these leagues throughout the world.
We mentioned yesterday a guy like Vasilov Nedomansky, who was inducted last year. I mean, his career in the NHL with Detroit, he was not a good player. It was way late in his career. He made the Hall of Fame on his international bona fides, and that's fine. But I think
you can't just say, hey, because he's the best from that country that he gets in. Like Nathan Walker would be the best Australian to ever play in the NHL, or even to play hockey, and he's not getting in. So. Yeah,
you see, like so Funky in our chat room says Luongo should be first ballot. See, that's where.
Yeah, but he only retired last year.
No, I know, not there yet, but I don't see Luongo's career as being any better than Mike Richter's career, like in any way, shape, or form. Like I don't know how.
I mean, it really isn't.
It isn't.
But he played better. He played longer.
He had the injury history. He had success at multiple spots.
Yeah, he played longer. He won a gold medal. He
got to a final. I mean, he came close to winning a cup.
He's second in career losses. So I mean, he's I think third in career wins, but he's second in career losses.
He rode through some lean. I would say as well because he rode through some lean times with some bad teams.
Yeah, I mean Johnny Bauer's got a ton of losses too. I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's the reality that if you have a long career, you're going to be up there in wins, but you're also going to be up there in losses. So the top three in wins and losses, top three in losses are Brodeur.
I'm an X-vote. If you're going to tell me Luongo is better than Mike Richter, I'm going to argue with you. Now, but if you're going to tell me he's more popular, I'll say, yeah, you're probably right. He is more popular than Mike Richter.
Yeah, I mean that's because again he's Canadian.
Because Richter keeps to himself for the most part.
He's Canadian. He's out there in social media wizard, all stuff. Like he's got those things going for him.
Yeah, it's different errors.
The stuff that Richter does right now with the NHL, like all the green initiatives that Richter's part of.
But I mean, he's also not Canadian. If we want to bring that up,
but again, he retired before the true era of social media taking over, right? So the popularity was different. Granted, he was part of the core four in essence for the Rangers in '94, but then you had the strike or the lockout, and that kind of ended a lot of the momentum that was gained potentially.
And Russ, the name that has been mentioned prominently in terms of the female nominee is Jen Botterill.
Yeah, and Botterill's a slam dunk. Like
there's a couple, but yeah, she definitely deserves to be in.
Yeah,
if there's anybody going up against her, it's going to be nearly impossible to beat her.
Right.
Yeah, I think she's in. All right, let's talk about the Bruins, guys.
Hey, the Bruins.
We're talking about the big bad Stanley Cup
for 138. So
I know I'm going to call them the big bad Stanley Cup favorite.
Back into the show. So
right.
In spite of Russ's attempts to delay and deny.
We haven't had the conversation yet, so don't say anything, Mike.
I know. Are the Bruins indeed the Stanley Cup favorites? Like, this is the question that a lot of people talk to me about that they are. I mean, they are the best record
in the East, definitely.
Yes.
And they have shown over and over again they were a team that was one game away, a couple goals away from winning a Stanley Cup last year. They are arguably better than that team. I think this might be a better Bruins team than the team that went to the Stanley Cup final last year. I think they are. Overall, I think they are. I mean, you got to get, you still got to get the great goaltending in the playoffs. But
Rad's probably having his best year, so I think you could say that.
Yeah. I mean,
let me just bring this up because you mentioned his name. Today is the anniversary of the fateful Tuukka Rask for Andrew Raycroft trade. 14 years ago today. So if the beginning of the Leafs Bruins rivalry, thanks to the Fergler, John Ferguson Jr.
Wow. All right. Well, there you go. But anyway, we're going to talk about. I mean, I looked at Florida versus the teams. How they played this year versus the teams they could potentially play. And they had, they were pretty good. I mean, there were some teams that surprisingly they've struggled against over the last, even not just this year, but I went 2 years back.
Who are we talking about?
Boston.
I know, but he said Florida.
Oh,
yeah, so there's a ton of teams at least 5 teams that could face them. So
right. There's plenty of teams, obviously. I mean, among the teams, when you look at the battle for the the little.
By the way, if we're talking about Boston, I should be wearing the appropriate hat.
Yeah, put it back on. There you go.
There you go.
That's right. Pour one out for the Bruins.
Like your pants up, Anthony, too.
1-3 against Tampa. So look at the teams they're going to play against in this thing. 1-3 against Tampa, 1-2 against Philly, 1-2 against Washington.
Well, they're going to lose them.
Oddly enough, of the top 4 teams, they actually struggled against those 3 teams.
That's sharp analysis.
That means they're going to finish 4th in the round robin, and they're going to play the Leafs in the first round if they beat Columbus.
Right.
By the way, I've already given you my view that I understand how Boston, given it with a 10-point lead, would potentially lose the number 1 seed, even the round.
I agree.
The real wild card round.
Well, here you have it. We are in a pandemic. All right, so Florida, against the teams they could possibly play. I mean, they Toronto 2-1 against Toronto. They only played Carolina once all year, which is pretty funny, because obviously they were going to play them again. 3-0 against the Rangers, one of the teams the Bruins handled the best. 3-1 against Montreal. 0-2 against Columbus. And oddly enough, which is not that they're going to play Columbus, but they could play Columbus. Obviously, if Columbus were to win,
Columbus keeps advancing.
Yeah, I mean they could play Columbus. 2-1 against the Islanders, 2-1 against Pittsburgh. So they were and 2-1 against Florida. They basically didn't. I mean, it's not like it's interesting because the only team they were dominant against were the Rangers. And I mean, I don't know what that says about that's just the regular season.
And when were those games played?
Yeah, I can tell you in a second, actually.
Right, so if it wasn't in net, right? Whole different. There's a different.
Yeah, no, it's a different.
I mean, again, personally, I think all this. I mean, I used to write a whole thing about numbers and everything else before I do my playoff blogs. I don't even know if I'm going to bother doing it because, given the length of time between the games and where teams were at that point in time, whatever happened the first 68 to 70 something games of the year gets thrown out the window.
They played October 27th than it is an actual predictive measure.
But I think Rangers Bruins for a second. The Bruins beat them 7-4 on October 27th. That was a shootout. That's 11 goals. Then they beat the Rangers beat the Bruins 3-2 in overtime on November 29th. That would be Black Friday. And then the last game the Bruins won 3-1 on February 16th. So that's the closest we have to a real.
Which means they weren't 3-0 if the Rangers won one.
I think the overall.
I'm just calling wins and losses. I think the Rangers didn't win any. The Rangers lost in overtime.
I think the overall key when it comes to the Bruins is, and with a lot of teams that are coming into the playoffs, is the health of their organization. Torrey Krug will be 100% healthy.
Yep.
He was hurt for, I think, most of February and early March. They traded for Kasha. He was injured. He will be healthy. They're starting off with nobody out, and that for a team. That had some injury problems throughout the year. That's going to be big. Their defense is well. I mean, especially Chara, somebody who's in his 40s, well rested, going into a 2-month sprint, is going to be a big key for them.
Power plays. I like to just look at special teams. I always talk about special teams in the playoffs. They really matter. The Bruins, number 2 in the NHL in power plays. So obviously a really good power play. 25.2%. Who is number 1? 29.5%. You guys are. This kind of surprised me. 29.5% is a hell of a good power play, by the way. Like that's a 30% power play, which I don't think anyone's done in the NHL for a long time.
Was it Edmonton?
Edmonton, yeah. I mean Edmonton. That's amazing. 59 goals on 200 chances. Anyway, so they were number 2. The Blues were number 3 in power plays. So the 2 Stanley Cup finalists, were right there.
But Krug is an important part of that power.
Oh yeah,
huge part of that.
Yeah.
And then penalty kill. Where are they penalty kill? Because that's Bergeron's domain.
Yeah, penalty killing. A little bit different. Kind of surprising on this one. I was shocked. The Bruins come in at 20th on the penalty.
They lost some players. They lost to Chari. He was on the penalty kill. They lost like 2 players, I think, off their penalty kill.
Oh, actually, sorry, I'm wrong on this. I'm thinking. Wait a second. Hold on. I'm wrong. I apologize. on that. I'm looking at shorthanded defended status instead of power play defended. Sorry about that. Shorthanded defended. They were 3rd. Okay, so they were 3rd. Edmonton number 2. San Jose with the best penalty kill in the NHL this year. Surprising.
I mean, Edmonton number 2 is the biggest surprise I told you Nugent Hopkins was a part of that. Tip is a big part of that.
Draisaitl also, I think, showed a lot of penalty kill minutes as well.
Yeah, so 84.4%, 84.2% the Bruins were.
Russ, what I think is most important with Boston, and it's been important for them in terms of the last few years in the playoffs, is to have a 1-2 punch to be able to take the heat off that big line of Pasternak, Marchand, and Bergeron. Krejci had a pretty decent year. They've, DeBrusk is improving as a young player. They brought in Coyle last year. Now they bring in Kasha and Nick Ritchie from Anaheim. There's enough of a secondary level there that they don't have to completely depend on that top three, that MVP line or whatever the hell they call it.
And if Ritchie stays on the fourth line, they could really grind it out too. Plus, defensively, I think the reason why they were so good against a team like the Rangers can't match that team defensively. And the Bruins can match you offensively and defensively. And then that's where it's a tough matchup for anybody to play the Bruins. Even in this kind of weird year that we're going to have, they have so many veterans that I don't expect them to get bounced early. I just don't.
Goals scored, they were 7th in the NHL with 227. Goals against, they were let's see, they're pretty low here.
They were under 200, I believe.
The goals against, they were first, but they were first with 167. And therefore, the difference, the goal differential, they were first in the NHL with 60 goals differential. So that's really significant, obviously. That's 11 ahead of Tampa, who was in second in that, and then followed by Colorado and Philadelphia at 4, which is Philadelphia's been terrible goal differential for a while. It's the only reason I bring that up. Pretty impressive that the Flyers were 4th in goal differential this year.
That's the AV effect.
Yeah, there you go. So, so the Bruins, obviously you're looking at a team that 167 goals is giving up only 167 goals in 70 games is really something. I mean, that's a significant. I mean, that's way better than the next closest is 174. And then 183. So, I mean, really, and the second best defensive team in the NHL was Dallas. So that's kind of surprising a little bit too. Some of these things are
but unlike Dallas's defense came at the cost of their offense. They're again, using a Stratomatic example, they're playing a 1-0. They're not taking any offensive chances. That's why I think they had less than 200 goals offense, and they had 187 goals against. So, but Boston can score. That power play is a weapon, and it's tough not to take penalties against them because they're very chippy. So, I mean.
Well, just to say that, Mike, because the penalty minutes against, more penalties were taken against the Bruins than anybody else in the NHL. But you say that they were at 736 penalty minutes against them,
Marchand has something to do with that.
Yeah, so that's he's a Hall of Fame rat, and I'm using it as a compliment because it's valuable, especially in the playoffs when one power play makes the difference.
The second place team in that, by the way, penalties taken against them, the New York Rangers, which is surprising. They were at 717. So
a lot of that was Brendan Lemieux also.
Yeah, and I believe 31st in the league is the Leafs.
Is it? Yeah,
they have the least amount of power plays in the league.
They are they're right at they're 30th. 31st is Columbus.
Okay, well that'll be
talking about a series that shouldn't have many penalties called in it. I mean, that's like Columbus and Toronto. I mean,
minors retorts.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
There's going to be we're going to see a lot of lazy penalties early on. We're going to, because players aren't going to be at their top condition, and there's going to be guys getting dragged down. I can't even go by these numbers in the sense that it will run exactly the same because, again, it can't.
Oh, it can't. But what they show you is it's more of a comparative thing. That's to me like Boston, as far as penalty minutes taken. Boston was 6th with 682. The team that took the most penalties in the league this year, the New York Rangers, 781.
I'll say this, and maybe this will be. I don't think it's controversial. I think a Bruins first round loss this year would be a bigger upset than Tampa Bay losing in the first round.
I don't know about that. Tampa team was No, you might say it runs neck and neck. That Tampa team looked like it was going to roll last night.
Right, and
absolutely roll. I can't say,
and especially giving Columbus's lack of success.
Right, but
past, right? You looked at it and said, "There's just no way."
What emphasizes that is the sweep. They were swept by Columbus, but if Boston is swept, I think it'll be just as
I would say the closest I would be comfortable saying is as surprising. I wouldn't say it was more.
No, I mean they were plus 61 goal differential. The Bruins were the Tampa Bay Lightning was plus 98.
Yeah, they were. I
mean
they were parking the bus for 3 months.
Yeah,
and also they had a 2-goal lead in game 1 early.
Yeah, right.
Tampa Bay, they got up early when everybody started figuring their, making reservations for the next round. 3 goals, and then it just collapsed.
Yeah. I mean, Boston scored 227 goals this year. The Lightning scored 331 goals last year. Now, granted, you got to remember there's a longer season, right? But still, I mean, goals per game.
Now, Eck, we could talk about how pizza just is horrible in Boston. I mean, that's a reality.
Yeah, no, Boston's not a pizza town either. No, but that's that's a great clam chowder town.
But we have a chain of Boston pizzas in Canada. Go figure.
I know.
Yeah,
it's not Boston area pizza. I think it's the corporate name. It's not. I don't think it has anything.
But why? It's like
I don't know.
Boston.
The Boston Market is not a Boston area thing either. I mean, the Boston
nothing says chicken like Boston Market.
I know. I agree with you there. That's really
okay.
Crawling hockey talk. Now we're getting to do.
That's right. We were crapping on Chicago earlier. Now we're going to start crapping on.
Yeah.
Well, nobody listening.
Boston, you get yourself a good lobster roll in Boston. Get yourself a good, get yourself a good clam chowder. That's what you want there. That's for sure.
I hate clam
There's a Dunkin' Donuts every 0.1 miles in town. Every town.
Yeah, I've actually converted.
They got to pay for that Pasternak advertising.
Yep.
You guys, how about that? I think Krispy Kreme donuts are better than Dunkin' Donuts now, and I've actually gone to that.
Krispy Kreme is better than. You know what happened? I'll tell you what happened with Dunkin' Donuts when they started to freeze their donuts and then had to thaw them out.
Time to make the donuts.
Krispy Kreme. You could get Krispy Kreme right off the assembly line. It's better.
They built one in New York now, Russ. Right on like 46th and 6th. They're opening a big one there that I think is going to have the conveyor belt, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
So
if you get it with the conveyor belt and you get it right off the assembly line,
yeah, they come in hot, but they literally it's like cotton candy. It literally
just melts in your mouth.
But they expanded way too quickly when they got hot. I mean, we had one open by us. We had cars literally lined up for like 15 minutes to get the samples coming off. They opened.
So it's right next to the hospital where you can get an angioplasty.
Actually, not far.
One wasn't far, I can tell you that.
All right, so how can the Bruins lose? Let's throw about that. Like, what could happen that could cause this Bruins team to lose, Mike? I mean, you've seen the Bruins more than anyone. You know.
Easier said than done. But if there's a team that has a big line that can, I don't think you can shut down the Bergeron line. But by the way that you can limit them is to make them play defense. And if you make them play defense, if you put an all-star line up against, like say, if they're playing Florida and they put Huberdeau and Barkov up against Bergeron and Marchand, and they even draw even, then it puts a lot more weight on and a lot more pressure on the secondary players. Now, I think Boston has improved their secondary players that they can do that, but it's possible that another team's number one can at least break even. But I've seen it more than a few times where, like last year, the Tavares line, Hyman, Tavares, and Marner, for the first 4 games of that series, matched up very well against that line.
Yeah.
And then Hyman got hurt, and I believe they switched to Matthews, and that's when the advantage swung Boston's way. And then that line, their power play, that was the line on the power play along with Krejci and Krug, and the power play killed them. So
tell you the other thing, Mike. Yeah. Cassidy seems to push the right buttons with that team when he needs to make a change on a line, when he needs to play a line a little more in that game. Mm-hmm. Last 2 years, he seems to make all the right moves.
Yeah, no, the only thing I would say that last year that he didn't do, I think and he's got to get away from this. He overused Chara. Chara's not 30 years old anymore.
Right.
You've got capable defenders in McAvoy, in Carlo, in Krug, in Grzelcyk. You cannot play. I know you want to.
That said, with the time off.
Yes.
For Chara,
that'll help.
I would say you would cut his usage even more so under a normal circumstance.
Yeah, right.
He's got a little bit of a luxury here. I think it allows Chara to be able to play a little bit more. But I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
It has to be a better. The defensive minute distribution has to be much more evenly spread around.
Let's look at I looked a little bit at how the Blues beat him. Like the Blues beat him in the Stanley Cup last year, and what I felt like the Blues did that teams in the East don't do very well against the Bruins is the Blues didn't really care about what Marchand was doing. Like I really felt like the Blues. Like, normally when I watch, when we watch the Bruins play, I'm always hyper aware of like all the stupid stuff Marchand's doing. Like that's something that you look at. And I think because the East Coast, we've seen him in regular season games do stupid stuff, but in the playoffs, he tends to not do as many stupid things.
I mean, going back to that Stanley Cup, I think that the way the Blues beat the Bruins was at their own game. They were more physical.
Yeah, the Bruins were not the big. They were not the big physical team. St. Louis.
They weren't as physical. The Blues were a more physical team. There's no two ways about it. They were.
Yeah, Boston trying to outskate them. That was Boston trying to do. That was the part of the series that I thought was amazing to watch. Was not that the Blues were the ones who they were the ones playing. The predatory trying to hammer you on the forecheck type of game.
I remember the path that the Bruins went through. I mean, the Toronto series was not a physical series, but they played twice in the last 2 years, so there was some heated play. But Columbus played a really tough game against them. That's the way Torts wants to play. And then, but then they I think Carolina was not an overly physical team. But then the Blues stepped it up. So they went through 3 rounds where one round was a real test, and then the Blues late in the playoffs stepped up the physical play. Guys like O'Reilly, guys like Maroon, Pietrangelo,
Perron, Parayko.
Yeah, I mean they were tough.
Team.
Yeah, I mean to me when you look at it, and Mike makes a great point that the Bruins in a way had one of the easier paths to the Stanley Cup final you'll ever see. Like, and I don't mean that in anything against the teams they played, but I mean the Maple Leafs were obviously the toughest team they played, I felt. And then Columbus, who after they swept Tampa, Columbus had basically won the Stanley Cup for them. That was an amazing. That was the thing for them.
Toughest in terms of not toughest in terms of toughness. Toughest in terms of
the best team they played.
Offensively, but defensively they were inept. So but
none of those teams were. I mean, Columbus is good defensively, but not great offensively. Carolina was not good defensively.
No, but I think they'll struggle. If they even struggle at all, would struggle more against Columbus than the Leafs, simply because Torts will have these guys playing tough.
Yeah.
The Leafs don't play tough. I mean, I don't think the Bruins worry about the Leafs very much.
And the Leafs have a psychological block when it comes to
it. I also felt like the Bruins in the Stanley Cup final, the auxiliary players beyond that first line didn't step up. Like I felt like that you just saw when Marchand and Bergeron weren't scoring like they should be, they were scoring, but not as they should be.
Yeah, let's just say this: they weren't getting as much out of the Corrales and the Acharis.
Yeah, those guys were great getting there.
I mean, those guys were difference makers in the first couple rounds.
They were great getting there, but once they got there, there was not much to write about. I mean, the Bruins also faced. I mean, the Bruins were the better team a lot of the time, and I mean, watched a bunch of those games live. The Bruins looked like a better team, but they weren't great finishers. There wasn't a whole lot of skill finishing beyond that first line, and they were. Although obviously Binnington played really well and made some great saves at key times. Bruins just didn't have snipers. Like their snipers weren't sniping.
No, but the thing that you said was actually a big key. Binnington made the right saves at the right time. That was a big key, and I think the other key was like Braden Shen was really getting the best of Boston. Like that was the best we've seen Braden Shen ever play.
Oh yeah, that was definitely, and and Jaden Schwartz had. I mean, there were some really good players in that series. That definitely, and the defense, the Blues defense.
The defense is solid. We know that.
The defense owned that series. I mean, in my opinion, they're the ones who won that series. Not just defending but scoring too. That defense was just deadly. They scored big goals. That overtime goal, that defense was definitely. So I mean, if you're going to beat the Bruins, I think you got to do it from the goal out. You got to do it from the goaltending.
Well, I mean, that goes without saying. I mean, you need a hot goaltender, but I think the only way you can beat them is by limiting that number one line. That number one line is the key to everything.
But after 10 minutes in that final game, nobody thought the Bruins were beating St. Louis.
Yeah. No,
they had basically, for them to win in St. Louis, it took all they could muster just to do that.
Well,
and they trounced them, and then everybody kind of knew it's going to be a big task to beat them again.
At that point in Game 7, I noticed Marchand and Pasternak had no gas left. They were
I
exhausted.
never did in a press box. Like we were in the press box, and that Russ was right like next to me in that press box in the game 7. And I remember this, Russ, but like we were with around some Bruins reporters, like bloggers and things like that. And I don't ever remember being in a game 7 situation in another team's building with less confident people.
I know
than those Bruins reporters were. They going into that game, they just felt like there was no way they were going to win that game.
I know it's true.
They were playing the Leafs.
It was really bizarre. I mean, they watch them all the time. So
Andy Sheffield was the most excited guy there for
good
reason.
And you look at that, like somebody who watches a team play all the time, they know like the ebb and flows of that team.
Which is a strange thing when you lose a game 6 in your building, and you would figure there's a little bit of a momentum swing there. But you saw basically Boston. It had that feeling of a team emptying the tank and hoping for a miracle at going back home.
More like staving off a loss rather than gaining the series.
Yeah, this wasn't Bruins Vancouver for sure. They did not. Then you knew they had the momentum in that series. This one, it just felt like they were holding on for dear life.
And you see the Stanley Cup final before, because the Stanley Cup final, when you have a chance to win the Stanley Cup in your building, the pressure is unbelievable. Like, and then when you're the Blues who lose Game 6 in your building, that sucked. I mean, the Blues wanted to win that game really badly, but Game 7 feels like it. So you feel like when you lose Game 6, if you're the Blues, you feel like you've lost the series. But then you still have another chance to win the series.
I'll tell you this. I mean, I just had Berube on a show a couple weeks ago, and I spoke to Keith Kachuk right after the loss. There wasn't one person that I spoke to in the St. Louis camp that didn't think they were going to go to Boston and not win. They all knew they were going to win. They all sort of gave the same answers, like, you know what? We're better than this. This was just a bad game.
Yeah. And I think the pressure, but there's a disappointment there.
So like my expectation is that we're going to see the Bruins either in the conference final or the Stanley Cup final. I think they make it that far. What do you think?
It is so hard to say, but I mean, I think they're they're definitely a Final Four team. I don't know if they're a final team, but I think they're definitely a Final Four.
I'll say conference final because we never know about injury.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that they're a Stanley Cup team though. Like as good as they were this year, I don't think they're as dominant.
This tournament setup it makes things even more interesting, especially if they don't have that top. If they don't end up coming out with the top seed after the wild card, there could be legitimate. You know, you're saying these games aren't a big deal, but they really are.
They really are.
If they slip that after earning that kind of a lead and feeling like it's been taken from them, they got to go one of two ways. Either they get indignant about the fact that this occurred, or they use it as fuel.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, I think on the one hand, as you said, they get a benefit because Chara is refreshed. He can basically log a ton of minutes. The flip side of that, as we discussed, is the lack of momentum, right? They had progressed so well during the season. They likely would have entered the playoffs on a high as the number one seed, carrying all the momentum into that playoffs. Now they start, in essence, from scratch, like every other team does. On paper, they have a ton of benefits, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate onto the ice when game action begins.
The one preseason game that everybody's going to play, though, they're going to be awful.
Yeah. And the weird thing about that, of all the teams, I've done the records of all the teams, of the top 4 teams in each conference. And if you were to just take those 8 teams and figure out how good they were against each other, so the top 4 teams in each conference against each other, the Bruins are the worst of those teams. And that's the strange thing for them finishing in the which shows you that the Bruins definitely dominated teams. They dominated bad teams without question.
But I think they swept Buffalo.
What was that?
I think they swept Buffalo.
Yeah, I mean they dominated teams but like you said, 1-3 against Philly, 1-2 against Philly, 1-3 against Tampa, 1-2 against Washington. They really, when it came to the other tough teams in the league, they were not as good. Now they were very good at the end of the year. I mean, when they played Philly in the last game, that were really good in that game. I mean, they looked
they don't fear anybody. Like you're right, after that game, and that was like the first time we had to do social distancing post game, and I knew it was the beginning of the end anyhow. But the one thing I took away from that was Rask being so ridiculously calm just during the game and after the game, and Cassidy basically just not having a worry in the world. Like he has so much depth on that team that he probably doesn't worry about that one injury or even that two injuries, unless it's Chara, because he's got somebody he could plug in. Like even goalie wise, he has somebody he could plug in.
If he loses Bergeron, he's in trouble. Why don't we finish off on this, Russ? Because we were talking about this before the show about the sort of changing strategy that some teams might have going into this draft regarding, players. And this has happened regarding players who are college players, regarding players who are European players, because with, the limitations in terms of scouting, video or interviewing players via Zoom, teams might be more apt to take players that they don't have to make a decision on right away within 2 years, CHL players that they have to sign within 2 years. They may want that extra time to have more of an idea of what these players are going to be.
Yeah, I just spoke to a few players recently, Philip Tomasino, who's with Nashville, and Ty Tullio, who hasn't been drafted yet, and a few others before that. And what they're telling me is the Zoom calls, there's been more than one, after the pause, because, a lot of these guys didn't go to the top prospects game, so they didn't have any testing. They only got to see them through like March, whatever. There's no playoffs. They might, go by previous year what they did. But basically, if they have a question that comes up, they just schedule a call. Like, I don't think they're calling them that often, but they're doing it more than just the one interview that they would do at the combine. But they're not grilling these guys like we expect them to grill them, because they had already spoken to them during the year. And because of the regularity of these Zoom calls, it's not as intensified as the interview process was once was like at the combine. That's one thing. And then I do agree, Mike and I were talking about, and I think if you are a team that scouted Europe really well in the last 2 years, pre-draft for some of those guys, and then now draft year this year, I think you're going to draft a lot of those guys because you don't have to sign them 2 years out like you do CHL players. And I do think a lot of the overagers again, we saw them last year. We're going to see them again this year. And I do think there's going to be college players coming in late second on out, because again, you could let those guys play another 3 years in college if you want, especially if there's uncertainty, even with next year. Yeah. If there's uncertainty next year and you sign somebody and they can't really play anywhere, you've got only one more year left unless they amend the rules to have to at least sign that player to an ELC. That's, now you're talking an element of risk that never used to exist. So I do think it's changing drafting strategies.
I think it's interesting. That's a really interesting point. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the Zoom interviews, if you're thinking about a player too, it's way easier to do a Zoom interview.
Oh, absolutely.
Than it is to sit in a room with like 10 people from the other team.
Yep.
In a little cubicle, like they usually do. I mean,
I remember teams have talked to these guys during the season too. We always act like, well, they don't talk to them until the combine, but that's not really true.
Right, that's not true. Yeah, that's crazy to think about. But I wonder if you get a more realistic interview with a Zoom interview than you do, because.
Well, I mean, I can tell you, Tullio sounded a lot more confident and comfortable during the Zoom interview than, and he didn't say compared to the combine because he doesn't know, but he was saying how comfortable he was in those interviews. And I think it's for those reasons that you just said, Ek. It's hard to have an edge on a Zoom interview where I guess if you're in a room with 10 people from an organization, if nothing else, you feel the eyes on you.
You're 17 years old or whatever it is, I mean, think about that. I mean, your whole career has been leading to this moment, and now suddenly you're standing with 10 people from the Boston Bruins. I mean, that's got to be unbelievably scary. I mean, just like on anybody, any of these kids. I mean, I know that there are course. I know there's people out there that get hired to help them practice those things. I've talked to people who do this. Like their job is to help prospects prepare for these meetings with 10 people or whatever.
Yeah, but one of the things that going to a number of, I haven't gone to as many as Russ has, but going to a number of the draft combines here in Buffalo, the question I always like to ask, because these players, yes, they've been tutored, they've been coached, but that's why these teams will throw out the weird question to throw them off. And I always ask them, what's the weirdest question that you were asked? And, I've heard so many bizarre answers. That
It doesn't seem like they're doing that this year. Like Tullio said, it's basically been interviews like just sort of getting to know you.
Right. They're probably getting a better.
think in a Zoom-like setting, it's tougher because there's something. And granted, we're all looking at one another and see each other's facial expressions, but I think there's something that's different when you're in the room, and the stimulus is different in this case when you have multiple screens versus multiple people in the same room.
I mean, I'm more comfortable. Like, I'm more comfortable talking to people. I'm not really super comfortable talking to people live. Like, I'm not a really social like butterfly type character. I'm more comfortable in this scenario. Honestly, in life. I mean, so it's just, to me, that's just like, yeah.
And I think a lot of hockey players are that way too, honestly. Yeah. And so I do think interviews are coming off differently this year. And again, that's why, because there's been so little testing, why I'm really just shocked we haven't heard anything about Arizona, but I guess they're going to let the season roll out and finish first, and then we're going to hear about it.
Yeah, I am surprised that we didn't hear anything too. Like, it doesn't sound like they're going to get any, like, I don't know if they're going to get punished going to this draft or not,
Right.
That's a good question. All right, well, we'll be talking about the draft tomorrow, right? Because
Yep. On Friday, we've got the draft lottery, and just the only thing I'll say now, because to sort of lead into it for tomorrow, is they're going to break whatever the previous record is for eyeballs on that draft lottery. They're going to break it this year.
Now the lottery is Friday.
Yes, it's Friday. I guess we'll start talking about it maybe we'll talk about it on Friday.
Yeah, just one note here. Breaking this that might have an effect on the NHL next year, when obviously they're going to delay the beginning of next season to January. Ian Rappaport, who covers the NFL, is saying the NFL is considering letting local authorities determine attendance levels at NFL games.
Oh my goodness.
So, for example, if it's spiking in Tampa, then they won't allow anybody. But if there's no COVID in New York City, they may allow people to go to jet. Will the NHL allow local authorities to determine how many people will go to Scotiabank Arena or the KeyBank Center?
Do they have a choice not to do that? I mean, is there I don't know that they have a choice in that matter. I think that the NFL, what the NFL is saying there is just like, that's the reality of it. I mean, if the governor or the mayor of a town says you can't do this in that building,
well, they're putting the ball in their court. They're saying we will waive all responsibility here. We're putting it in the local municipalities. Putting it on them to make.
Well, if you have no fans, then you have no worries.
Right, but they want fans. So I think what they're saying is, and what they'll do, Russ, is they'll put pressure behind the scenes to have them allow people. But they can't be blamed for it because they're not the ones who made the decision.
Yeah, but that's a slippery slope. It's not going to be that cut and dry, Mike. It will not. They will not be able to abdicate all responsibility because it's still their event.
Right. All right, so we haven't done this for a while. We're going to do it today.
Draft lottery.
Draft lottery.
Have they augmented the?
I've augmented it. I just looked it
up to include like Team A, B, C.
I think so. It says
placeholders are in there. Then I'm in for it.
Thanks to our friends at Tankathon.com. We were on you guys before TSN was. Don't forget that. All right, so here we go. So yeah, apparently they have, because it says here, if you look at it, it says lottery phase 1. Yep. So it says here, the NHL decided to do a weird lottery. If any of the top 8 to 15 teams jump into that, anyway. But the simulation the odds on the site are a little screwy now, but the simulation should be accurate.
All right, let it roll.
Let it roll.
Here we go. Similarity. All right, the LA Kings.
Oh.
Buffalo second.
Buffalo is second.
Buffalo's second is perfect. That's perfect.
So does that mean that Kim Pegula walks up to the? Oh, there won't be a stage. That's right. I'm sorry. Forget.
Wait. So can this happen though? This way? Is this?
No, it can't, because San Jose.
Yeah.
Right.
No, this is so that
Ottawa gets that. Yeah. So it's
Ottawa. Really only looking at
the 5th pick. No way.
I guess the only thing we're looking at here, the odds are basically the same for the top pick.
What this is saying is that the third pick is going to be one of the 8 teams. Because that third slot is going to be like Team A or Team B or whatever. Yeah. And then after phase 2, it's determined that Florida got the pick.
Right. But I'm telling you, there's a 0% chance that Ottawa, their first pick is the number 5 pick. That's a 0% chance based on the fact that they have the most balls in it. So this is not right.
Yeah. At the worst, the first pick they're going to have is third.
Right. Look,
the Rangers
on 3 of them, they haven't gotten any higher than 4.
I know. I'm looking at this here.
There you go, 3rd.
There you go. That was the top pick.
Number
I
1.
finally did it. Not
Okay.
buying it.
Sorry, Tankathon, you lose.
Yeah, unfortunately. All right.
Drawing board.
Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. Be safe. We will talk to you again tomorrow.
I hope.